What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So tomorrow is New Year's Day, and there won't be a Newswave in the morning. I feel like people will be recovering in the morning. But then also the next day is Friday, and I was kind of back and forth, but I think what I'm going to do is there won't be a Newswave on Friday either. We'll be back next Monday to kick off 2026, the first Newswave of the year. But what I'm going to be doing here is just other videos throughout the next several days. Some really fun stuff, I think, actually, that we'll set up here. It's just Evan's even out like on kind of a mini vacation. Does he want to remote in to edit Newswave on a Friday? Again, a couple of days here off, and then we're back next Monday. But I do have a bunch of stuff to go over here to close out 2025 with now the last Newswave of the year. And that does include Nintendo looking into maybe even fixing a major flaw for the Switch 2, especially in portable mode. We also have Shawn Layden talking about a universal game format across all platforms for the future that I just have a lot of questions around. And the whole RAM shortage thing continues to come up with now some manufacturers even looking to work backwards some of the old technology to kind of solve this current crisis. But all of that and more. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. Helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members for the channel do get Newswave early. If you would like to learn more about that, click the join button or link in the description down below. And we're going to start today with the Epic Game Store, as they have been giving away games for like the Christmas holiday season. And I just wanted to point out the most recent one you can see. It's Trine Classic Collection. That's Trine 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm sorry, you will need to have an Epic Game Store account to claim these, but if you already have it or you're willing to set one up, go ahead and add these. They're free. That's how they get you in the door, giving away free games. And I also wanted to bring this up because apparently they're going to have 2 more games, I believe, that they'll give away, or even collections like this. So just a heads up, and I'm expecting, like I'm sure many people, they'd probably close out strong with probably one more big reveal, so just keep an eye out for that. But yes, if you have not done this and you have an account, or again are willing to set one up, go ahead and claim the Trine Classic Collection since it is free. Also, we got some more sales data for the Switch 2. This though over in the UK, and we can see from Christopher Dring saying Switch 2 has now outsold Wii U, Sega Dreamcast, and PlayStation Vita in the UK. These would be lifetime sales for those 3 platforms, whereas the Switch 2 will be what, like 6-7 months. Yeah, since release. So, look, that's just where we are with these systems, especially one as popular as the Switch brand. Yeah, it's going to outsell 3 systems that, well, I mean, just didn't do well when they came out at all, even lifetime, over the Wii U, the Vita, or the Dreamcast. The Dreamcast has gone in 2 years. Sony hasn't made a handheld since the Vita, and the Wii U had people question Nintendo's existence completely. So yeah, go figure, the Switch 2 is rolling along and outselling all those platforms in the UK, and based on their current trajectory, just worldwide, globally, they'll have it completely outsold for these 3 platforms here. Probably the next time we hear about sales from Nintendo, that would be in February for the next investor briefing. Oh, and of course, tonight, clocks will tick over to January 1st, 2026, and there's one system that people are slightly concerned about, if not curious as to what happens, because the clock doesn't actually go that far into the future, and that's for the Xbox 360. Now we can see this. This is over on Pure Xbox, and they are quoting an image over on the Xbox 360 subreddit of a person realizing, wait a minute, the clock doesn't go past 2025. So when you set your initial, like when you turn on the system for the first time, you're doing the setup, it may ask you for the date and the time. Well, that doesn't go up past 2025. I mean, 20 years on the market, maybe Microsoft wasn't thinking about it. However, there was one user who did kind of simulate this, jump ahead, and then see what happens when it ticks over into, at that time, the theoretical 2026. And it looks like the system can count beyond 2025, but you're unable to manually set the date beyond that. So maybe Microsoft will come back and do some sort of update. They've done rebootless updates, I guess, where they can just kind of push it through the network, and then it's a very small change that's able to happen without needing to do a full like reboot of the system and notify you, really. So maybe that's something they do, or they just don't really care because it's the Xbox 360 and they very clearly moved on from it. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Nintendo and their Switch 2, with an issue that was noticed around launch. And since then, it's sort of picked up a lot of traction because people were able to measure just how slow the screen is for the handheld system. And they realized it's actually one of the worst in terms of that responsiveness. like on the market at all. And a lot of this comes back to Nintendo and the amount of power they're drawing from the system, trying to fit into a certain box for the wattage that they're using in handheld mode. And part of that, we think, comes down to the screen itself. And while they could almost overclock the screen basically, or do overdrive, it may affect the battery life that would become more noticeable and more of a problem. But because of all of this, like, so for example, if you go into NSO, fire up Super Mario World, this is a great example people were showing even online. You run across the screen as Mario, you'll notice behind Mario's sprite, there is like this trailing pattern, almost this ghosting, because of the responsiveness of the screen. Well, it seems that maybe Nintendo is going back and working to fix this, whether it's with another screen lottery we get to look forward to now in manufacturing, or maybe through software. So that's something that's been floated, is that Nintendo could push a firmware update that would, quote unquote, overdrive the screen and make it so that it's less noticeable for some of the ghosting or just kind of blurriness in the screen when you move around. Now, this first came up from Digital Foundry. We can see this, and this is part of their video that they posted a few days ago over on their Clips channel with John Linneman discussing a UFO 3.0 test, and that mostly just shows off screen responsiveness and everything, saying a patron of ours that I talk to regularly, who we met back in London, who goes by the nickname Draga, recently stopped by a Nintendo shop where he was over in Japan that was showcasing Switch 2, and it's a brand new shop. So the demo units were also new, and he was comparing the screens in the demo kiosk to his own personal Switch 2, and noticed he perceived a noticeable difference in motion clarity on the new unit, which now has us wondering, did Nintendo make a hardware or software adjustment to the screen? So that's kind of the issue right now. Much more data is required here, as they're going off of just a write-in from a patron here who experienced what they thought to be just a clearer screen when demoing it at a new shop. And right now, a lot of Switch 2 systems have been sold, especially around the holiday season. Millions, I'm sure, over the last month or two have been sold. So there are systems that have been recently manufactured that maybe would fall in line with this. So one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up here, and while it's going to be very difficult for people to compare unless they have a friend who's had a Switch 2 for a while, if there's a Switch 2 you just got, I mean, like seriously, this past week, or maybe you're planning to get a Switch 2 in 2026, the first month or two into the year. I mean, I think it'd be interesting to see if we have maybe a different screen going around. Like, the screen lottery's been brought up for all kinds of Nintendo handhelds. This wouldn't be new. Like the IPS screens, the warm, like the yellowish tint screens, even in the Switch 1 was a whole thing, but the 3DS has gone through this at length. So that's one concern, is that Nintendo isn't necessarily figuring this out through a software or a patch of some kind. They're figuring it out by just going back and changing things out in the supply chain, which is great for people who buy a Switch 2 now or going forward, but a real shame for people who were early adopters and picked up the system at launch. And I will say, it has been theorized for a bit now that Nintendo could fix this problem with a firmware update. And it's one of the reasons when a firmware update happens, people are very curious to see any notion of that maybe behind the scenes, because I don't think it's something that Nintendo would just outright announce, hey, we fixed some of the responsiveness or the blurriness on the screen. With how Nintendo kind of works at times, these technical details with firmware updates, they would just kind of leave it up to us to discover this, and we know many accounts or data miners like to go through these updates to see what exactly it changes in the firmware, and that's certainly something that would be noticed. And of course, people would then do different tests and try to figure out how much they were able to alter or maybe improve that screen. So Digital Foundry has already kind of mentioned they're going to look into this. So just something to keep in mind, and at least keep an eye out for, especially, again, if you end up getting a Switch 2 here sometime soon. If you have a friend who has an older Switch 2, put them side by side with the same game and see if there's any difference there. Next up, let's talk about that RAM shortage once again. That is, I mean, just sweeping headlines. That's all we're hearing about, because it's also all we're seeing when it comes to pricing. Now that it's very noticeable with RAM and solid state drives, it's definitely something people are keeping an eye on now outright when it comes to updates as to how these companies can sort of solve this thing. Well, one answer could be working backwards. So we can see this. This is over on videocards.com, saying a rumor from board channels claims ASUS is adjusting its Q1 2026 motherboard production plan. The post says the company is shifting supply chain and factory capacity toward DDR4 models. This is a response to increasing price of DDR5 memory. On the AMD side, the claim is that ASUS will raise output for AM4 boards. The post points to higher supply for B550 and A520 DDR4 motherboards to meet demand. This is something that's already come up. The idea of, all right, look, DDR5 is incredibly expensive, but DDR4 is not that expensive. At least it wasn't. Something I've also noticed, because I had that idea too, as I saw this coming up. I said, I wonder if DDR4 is really that problematic for people. But RAM speeds it's something that I just don't think people notice much. The reason people get DDR5 or upgrade their RAM, for the most part, this is how it's always been for me, is because the new processor you got that requires the new motherboard that you got requires new RAM. I've really never been in a situation outside of, okay, maybe relying on an APU. I've never been in a situation of this 2800 megahertz RAM. It's not doing it. I need to go up to 3200. No way I can play any of these games. It's just not something that people notice much. So I do think there's an avenue for people who want to save money, but still kind of build a PC right now to rely on older parts and go back to DDR4, or maybe just buy DDR4 because they never got DDR5 in the first place. And the thing now though is, because demand is starting to shift a little bit in that direction, pricing's going up for RAM for DDR4, even motherboards, slight uptick, although the used market for motherboards is vast, so you can probably find an AM4 equipped board relatively cheap. Again, though, you would be going used, and there is always a risk involved, especially with the motherboard side. So now I'm wondering, if ASUS does this, will they be able to just flood the market a bit more with new parts? And is that something that would work to be a short-term solve? Because eventually DDR5 has to be figured out. And I would like to think that sooner rather than later, but again, I believe we'll end up in 2027 most likely before we see any kind of resolution, because a lot of the contracts that have been signed, according to reports, is going all the way through 2026. So it's going to be a bit, but I have some builds I was throwing together as well, some really weird stuff that'll be interesting to see, like a $150 gaming PC that's like changing the BIOS and the video card. We're going in there, okay? So keep an eye out for that stuff. I think it'll be a lot of fun to see how much we can squeeze out of pretty old parts. Next up, let's talk about Shawn Layden. As well, he was former Sony executive at PlayStation. He moved over to Tencent, and occasionally he'll do interviews that at times I think is really telling us where some of these big publishers want the industry to go. And again, working at Tencent, he does talk to a lot of other people at these different publishers, so it's worth hearing him out on what he has to say, even though sometimes he'll say stuff and I go, I don't know how that would actually work in the real world with gaming. But still, we can see this. And this was transcribed over on IGN as they were quoting the Pause for Thought and Naomi Kyle YouTube channel. Shawn Layden talking about the gaming industry overall, a bunch of different things from the current going-ons with it. But he did talk about VHS and Betamax, kind of mentioning, why did VHS end up beating Betamax? Well, they had a universal format that was used by multiple different manufacturers. And then he goes into talking about this, saying, I think we need to get in a world where we have a gaming format. Maybe it just comes from PC, maybe find a way just to do it all on a Linux kernel or something, and then we have a consortium around that. You have licensing programs which allow other manufacturers to build into that space. And then you can talk about real numbers moving. You know, that's how you get to the ubiquity of the toaster. But right now, I think we're trapped in this containment field. So the funny thing about this, again, ex-Sony executive, PlayStation and stuff, he's talking about Microsoft's vision right now with Xbox, and people look at that and go, well, how's Xbox doing? Well, not great, but I think that's more of a branding thing currently than anything else. But the idea being, you have even just one OS, one game format, because that's kind of what you would need. It would all have to be very uniform, and it would work across multiple different devices, even from all these different manufacturers. So he mentions the VHS. You could also mention DVD. I mean, hey, look, DVD, it's one format, but it works on the Panasonic DVD player. It works on the Sony DVD player. It works on the Toshiba DVD player. You just pop it in. Same with TVs. You could say that. At least back in the day. Now with the, I don't know, all the smart TVs and stuff, there are certain apps that work on some, but not the others. This whole thing there. But the idea being, if you buy a DVD and your friend has a DVD player, it's going to work there. It doesn't matter if it's Sony's or Microsoft's DVD player, we'll say. But then you get back down to the idea of it's very different because these systems have their own stores attached to them, digital stores. They collect royalties on games, and all of that is predicated on the idea that they have a console that is part of a walled garden or ecosystem that they have worked to build up, because otherwise there's just not much reason for them to make these systems in the first place, or at the very least subsidize these systems. They would have to charge much more for each one because they look to make money on the hardware itself. So while Shawn Layden, what he's saying, man, what a world that would be. Where it's just, you buy a game, you buy the newest Call of Duty game, and it just works on everything. And you know what? Dell can get involved. HP could start making a game system. And to a degree, that is what Microsoft sounds like they're trying to work out. But again, Microsoft seems more focused on the OS, the operating system, the driver of all the hardware, rather than the hardware itself. So is that how people really want the entire gaming sphere to be, where there's just one OS? It's what it is. There's one company that technically owns the OS, and that's kind of it. I don't know. That just seems like a strange future, and one that kind of pulls away from the idea of the competitive nature that we've had all the way up to this point when it comes to console manufacturers battling it out for your dollar. So again, it sounds like he's imagining a utopia that I just don't know if it really exists right now with the current technology, but then also kind of the business nature at hand. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about the first gaming showcase that has been announced for 2026. We can see this, and this is posted over on the New Game Plus account, saying introducing a new type of game showcase, the New Game Plus Showcase. Okay, it's creator-led, no paid placements, genuine excitement and conversation. We'll see about that. And exclusive game footage and interviews. 45 games coming to you on January 8th. I have no idea what's going to be shown here. It's a very new account. It was formed in actually this month in December. Some people were mentioning, Crimson Desert might be there, and then they're doing the eye emojis, I guess. And this seems to be something from Jake Lucky and a few other people who have worked to put this together. As he mentioned on his account, saying spent the last 8 months working to put this together. New Game Plus Showcase, talking about what we all love, video games. And look, I mean, at the very least, I would like to check this out just to see what they announce, and if nothing else, go through the press releases and see if we have any genuine surprises or really cool updates. But just wanted to make you guys aware, we do already have a showcase coming up here in about a week, so keep an eye out for it. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, and that's Game of the Year Madness Day 12. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an upset forming here on our hands. Death Stranding 2 versus Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D Remake. Dragon Quest 1 and 2... 52% to 48%. Wow, that's a big one. That's a lower seed taking out a higher seed here. And I mean, honestly, the Dragon Quest fandom is rising up here to take out a Kojima game, one that was nominated for Game of the Year at the Game Awards. Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D Remake, nowhere to be seen at the Game Awards, really. But here it is, working to take out one of the favorites even, some would say. So that's big moves there, and you can never count some of these games out, guys, as I'm saying. We'll see what else we have over the next few days as Game of the Year Madness will continue to run, even though we're off for Newswave until Monday. And we'll finish up with the comments of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Lowe, who says, that's actually good news for the next generation consoles because we don't need them anytime soon. And that's what I've been saying. All the comments below the news for this was, oh, good. I don't have to worry about buying a PlayStation 6 or the next Xbox in a year or two. I can wait 4 or 5 years for that thing. It's not a big deal. Even cross-gen, I might be okay with the PS5. And I did see people saying it feels like the PS5 or the Xbox Series hasn't really been stressed at all. And I mean, I get, look, when I played Final Fantasy VII Remake, or Rebirth, I should say, and there was performance mode, the thing was blurry for 60 frames per second or 30 FPS for quality, I started to go, okay, maybe we're seeing it. But then the PS5 Pro comes out, and it's been fine with that game, and it's been a sketchy launch for the Pro, but I still think there's a lot of headroom for that system. So it's like we have the option. If you go, you know what, I would like better visuals right now. It's there. It exists, but you don't have to get it. And that's the thing. I think with previous generations leading up to the end, when we were, 6-7 years in, you start to think about things you'd like to see solved. I don't really know what people want to be solved right now outside of maybe install times when you pop the disc in. And we already know more than half the user base is digital anyway, so they just download the game. So Sony has their work cut out for them, because if all they're really selling people on right now is ray tracing, people might legitimately hang on to the PS5 till like 2035. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card. Or maybe you did get a Switch 2 very recently for the holidays and you want to hear all the things you should know about your new system. I went over that in a video and I'll leave it right below it. Thanks guys for watching. Have a great weekend. Have a great New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. Have some fun. Be safe. And I'll see you guys next Monday, 8 a.m. Eastern Time for Newswave.